Yeah, like I was saying, I would say top three cities I've been to would be Istanbul, London, and now here in Buenos Aires. I think for ye, obviously, how like you're more weighted client wise towards the UK. I think the time zone could kind of would annoy you a wee bit more, just because you'd be -3 from where you already are. But because we're more US heavy, it kind of like you're still 2 hours ahead,
Yeah,
east coast of the US, so it kind of just works really nicely there. But
very
have you
nice.
got a sort of roll into that, mate? Like, what's been going on with you guys in 2023, the big year across many different fronts? I think actually before you nearly have to go into that, I think a brief background is nearly in order, because I don't think people don't realize that you were the mega genius pulling the strings in a couple of different ventures here that they would know about on the agency side,
God.
on the brand side, on even the 3PL fulfillment center side, or even on there. But I suppose a bit of background for people on how you nearly got to where you are today would be very much in order.
Yeah, I guess, yeah, where to even start on that question? I guess starting with the main venture that Soar with us was started an agency about 4 years ago now. D2C specific growth agency called Soar with us, servicing about 70 clients, 60 to 70 clients, somewhere in that um, range. Been building that for 4 years with Joe, co-founder. Alongside that, got For You Advertising, which is a TikTok specific growth agency, UGC, TikTok growth, paid ads, again, D2C specific, but different clientele, different offering. And then involved in JAQ Group with Conor, who was on, any regular listeners, I think he was on a couple of episodes before, wasn't he? Growing the Essence
Mm-hmm.
Vault. And then we've actually now got 4 brands live in that group. So 3 and the Essence Vault, with one more launching this year. And they're all starting to turn towards looking very positive from like a profitability standpoint. So looking to grow that aggressively through 2024. But yeah, it was a good, last year was a big year on all fronts, I think, all 3 businesses, in terms of growth and progression.
Yeah, I think very much for anyone listening to this who is generally into ecom in any way or like runs an agency, would highly recommend following Ollie as well, just for some of the stuff that he'd be posting on all platforms, on like Twitter and LinkedIn primarily. But yeah, I'm interested there, man, in terms of how like the year went as well. So like you've documented before like how Soar with us has kind of grown, and it's been obviously you're potentially like the premier agency really in the UK, like in the departments of like D2C marketing agencies. I think you could very much make that claim. But I'd definitely like to touch on like more like the later stuff with Soar. You have gone into the backstory a bit more, but there's one thing that I've actually always wanted to ask you, even with how long we've known one another, which is that you had touched on, I think, the first time you've been on the Midnight podcast, of you yourself and Joe had this like, you were like growing decently, but then you had this almost like massive inflection point in 2021 as a year where like you're growing fairly steadily up until that point, and it's
Yeah.
almost like something clicked. And I actually didn't get to hear you like discuss almost what that growth path was like, because I think the numbers you shared, you'd like 6x basically the whole like your monthly run rate in the course of a year,
Yeah.
roughly. But have always wanted to ask you, did was that you just in absolute nightmare mode? Was that like you almost, like coming through break, like kind of breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough? Like what went on, within the company in 2021 that allowed you to go from kind of a bedroom outfit to being, like we were saying, like premier, like very much you can make the claim premier agency in the UK for what you guys do, like in a very short space of time.
It's a good question. I'd not really reflected on much of that before, to be honest. Not in depth. I guess it's good to. Probably should do it more. Um, I think it's a combination of factors. Like, yeah, we grew ridiculously aggressively through 2021. I think one is timing. I think timing was a factor. COVID, market shifts, so many like macro trends that we were fortunate to be like, um, or like involved in those movements. So that's definitely one factor. In terms of like personal actions to deliver those outcomes, I think one element coming into starting the business was my background being involved in ecom ventures previously, which I think really helped sort of speak the language of the people we were going after. That experience, and knowing like the language, knowing the tactics, and being able to execute at a pretty high level coming into it, I think allowed us to probably just close more business than if that wasn't the case, and allowed us to do it much quicker. And then yeah, like relentlessly executing against like short term goals, I think was the other thing. Like we were very intentional around setting like short term aggressive goals, very like impatient in the micro, patient in the macro, like focus on what you can control, hitting daily, weekly numbers, and letting the other things take care of itself through that period. And then taking it again up probably a level beyond that is just getting some of the right people in the right seats early doors. And again, there's a little bit of luck involved in that, I think. Some people we knew previously, other people we were very fortunate to stumble upon at the start of their career, and they're still with us now. So probably a combination of those four factors really unlocked what I'd consider like not exponential, but very, very rapid compounding growth for the business.
100%. I think even something maybe I'd chat to Joe about this as well. Like in the beginning, you guys hadn't actually like massively divided out the roles necessarily, where like you kind of like it kind of became more apparent that Joe would be more like more front facing, like more I guess CMO or CRO, and you'd be kind of more COO. But it was kind of, I wondered at that time, was that when you kind of divided out the roles and you were like, right, Joe is going to handle like more so sales, and I'll kind of handle everything post onboarding.
I was at one point I was managing 18 different ad accounts for businesses, which is just like daft and like definitely not something I'd advise doing. To a high standard, actually, I just want to say we didn't churn any of those. But like, yeah, like natural strengths. Like starting the business, like I was a pretty like quiet, shy individual. I'd find cold calling someone incredibly hard. I think now I've in a way, building the business has made me a very confident individual. But like, if I arc back to looking at like 2019 when we started this, getting an e-commerce or any business owner, whether it's like a person selling fucking fireplaces down the road, which was one of our early clients, or if it was regardless of who it was, like I'd find that really intimidating. Where Joe came from a background of doing that day in day out. He was doing a lot of work in his previous role before we started the agency was focused on like calling decision makers, speaking to business execs, etc. So there was a bit of a natural skill set alignment there with me having a bit of a background in ecom and him having a bit of a background in that. So yeah, I think that was another big factor. That's why I'm a big advocate of co-founders for agencies, because I think there is a very natural like split. Like you can sort of divide that down the middle from a biz dev versus fulfillment perspective in a way that take it to an e-commerce brand side. You can do it, but it's a little bit less. It's a little bit more like convoluted. Like all things kind of need to speak to each other. Obviously, they need to speak to each other in an agency, but probably not to the same level as maybe an e-com business. As long as you've got that Passover kind of dialed in. So yeah, I'd say that was a big thing as well.
Yeah, man, I think about this a lot because I actually don't even think I'd enjoy doing the agency without a co-founder, or well, at least not without Conor. Like I think, like you're saying there, like there's like a natural, there's a point of actual luck as well there in terms of finding someone where like your skill sets align and you're kind of a good match for another in that respect. But obviously, we have examples of people that we know who are very good solo founders in that. But I mean, yeah, I mean, for you, like going up the way along, you know, I definitely found it kind of help with confidence as well. Like, you know, you have a co-founder, you have someone to bounce ideas off, and because the split's so natural. But yeah, I mean, like for you, even like because you went on to start For You actually started with more business partners. So like you're it's definitely like very, very pro co-founder in that way, as I would be. But like, do you think there are any kind of, when you see, let's say, solo agency founders, do you think there are any differences in the business where they maybe have to hand things off a bit earlier and it can have maybe some adverse effects in a sense?
I think it depends on the individual you are. I think there are some really good solo founders. I think as a solo founder, you have to get one or two core individuals around you and that would have to come from an employee perspective, I'd assume, if it's not going to come from a business partner perspective or an external consultant. But I think if you're starting a service-based business from scratch and trying to grow it aggressively and quickly, the idea that you can do everything well I think is not, it's just false. You need to bring it rely. I think if you're a solo founder, it relies on getting a couple of C-suite or seriously high-level talented individuals into the business early to allow you to specialize in where you are best. I think through our mutual connections, they've mostly done that. They've got like one or two like right hand, whether it's a COO, a CMO, XYZ role. Most of them have that, and I know a lot more agency owners who are co-founders than solo founders, I think.
I mean, I'm thinking even like on a brand, like there, because it's so easy to see the distinction within an agency, but when you think of it with a brand, you're like, how would you divide that? I feel like every partnership there would be completely different. Like I don't think one person is necessarily just making sure creatives are really dialed, making sure like media buying is really on point, like just that creatively and performance marketing wise that they're really good, and then the other is doing all the operations, because there's so many different parts of the operations of a brand. I don't think you'd necessarily just be the COO by yourself. I think there'd be like a COO and then a kind of a sub COO nearly, in a sense.
Yeah, and there's different levels of operations. You've got like marketing operations, you've got actual operations, products, logistics, etc. It's a lot more like, so I guess agency's a little bit simpler in that sense. Simpler in one way and more complex in others. But yeah, I think it's a little bit more difficult to split them off. For JAQ, like me and Conor split it. I just handle all of the marketing and just make sure he deals with all the other problems, which keeps things simple for us. But I think it will differ. Like even if I think through our clients who are co-founders, some of them, with some of the businesses, like a setup where both founders are involved in every decision. Others might have lanes that they operate in. I think it's very different, like you say, very very unique to each business.
100%, yeah. But I think definitely, like we're saying, agency a bit easier to kind of define. So with you then, kind of in Soar, like as you've grown, so like both of us would have started very much sort of like bedroom style agency, right? Like in the beginning, like you're like, it's almost in a sense kind of like take what you can get client wise, and like the very early on stages and that kind of thing. But how did you like? Right. So I was thinking about this a lot last year. So I was thinking about this concept of like high impact, low likelihood objectives. I don't know if I was talking to you about this before, but it's basically where you move on from having a task list to kind of moving on to more so working on projects and objectives.
Yeah.
And like, it's almost this mentality shift that I had that I really fucked up actually, like around the middle of last year, where I didn't realize that my role had sort of changed. So like I used to kind of identify with myself as like how much work I could get done on any given day. And it was like, how much of a workhorse can I be? Like I can just power this all on myself. Like I can produce this much content. I can take this many calls, all the rest of it. And then you kind of start to realize after a while, it's about kind of getting a bit more smart with what you're doing, with taking on the right kind of clients, with hiring the right kind of people. And it's not necessarily about your output on a given day. It's more about your judgment. And then we grown to a point where, I was very much out of delivery. So then I was like, oh, fuck, like, what am I doing here? Like, this is, it felt a bit unusual to me because my role had completely changed. And it took me far too long to catch on that was actually how it was meant to be. And it was like, instead you're kind of moving on to something like sales, which is high impact, but low likelihood of succeeding. Hiring, high impact, but low likelihood of finding the exact right person in that time. You're going to have to do many interviews and go around through that long process. Mm-hmm. And so it's a far less dopamine sustaining way of living your life. So then you're kind of like, oh, fuck, what am I doing here? Because you're just working on things that have a very low likelihood of succeeding. So you don't get that sense of completion from completing a task list. So that was something I've been thinking a lot about actually the last few months, of like not catching on to that quick enough. But for how quick you grew in a sense, I feel like, I mean, you're quite a workhorse, of course, but it's like, I feel like you maybe caught on to that a bit, like maybe not, but I mean, like, I guess it's more like how like roles can change nearly as a
Yeah.
founder as it kind of grows with an agency.
Yeah, I think there's two different things there. I think there's like growth rate and scaling a business, and like not. I think there's like there needs to be a real realization that like not every task is built equal. Not every lever is the same size, and like a lot of growing. I think a lot of growing a business, but growing an agency and growing an ecom brand specifically, like is about focusing on pulling the right levers and focusing resource around the right areas at the right time. Um, and doing that consistently is a lot of the time is like what separates like good from great. I think like I always peddle the idea of like do less better, like focus on growth as a process in every business. So it's like and the solution to growing faster is not like complex, making that process more complex. A lot of the time it's doubling down on where you're getting momentum. So like in an e-commerce brand, if you're starting to get momentum through like a Facebook ads or a Meta ads, just because that started to work doesn't mean you should go and do another 3 marketing routes. You should just double down on what's working until it becomes challenging to do so. So I think that's one part of that process. The second part is like, as you grow a business, realizing, like how your role within that organization changes. Like it does move to more project work. Once you get to a certain size, it moves more towards like coaching people to be better. Like ultimately, the higher up an organization you get, like the less decisions you probably make on a monthly basis, but the higher the impact of those decisions, I'd say. And a lot of them will be like, oh, do we allocate resource to XYZ marketing tactic department? Do we do this initiative or do we not? Whereas like when you're very like executional, it can be something as like way more trivial. I think on a daily basis. I think like appreciating that and being like cognizant that that's going to happen as you go and you grow as a company is important. And like you say, not just chasing busyness at the expense of impact.
100%. Yeah, I mean, it got to that, like, there's a point in September where I took on a couple of people who were like absolutely the wrong clients and had to send them packing like fairly soon. That was chasing busyness, like absolutely. It was like, yeah, I wonder, do you know? But like that's a really bad decision. Like the cost of a bad client is really fucking high.
Yeah, really high. It's just folks. Yeah, folks. So, it's just easier to. It's high. It's high in the sense of so many areas as well, like sucking resource away from other better clients to work with, or making your team less fulfilled if it's a bad fit and difficult to provide for, all sorts of reasons.
100%. How would you say that would, like, for you, from going from like media buying on bloody 18 accounts, like definitely like you're moving up like there, that would be, I wouldn't say you'd be feeling too fulfilled there. That seems like actually a pretty miserable way to live long term.
Chaos.
Like for you, what did like what you were working on change as you scaled from, let's say, going from like from just yourself, Joe, and then later Matt, to then going to having 5 to 10 team members, and having 10 to 15, and then getting up now to like 20, and now up to 30. Like, did you find, like, were there different levels where you found, okay, like now my role in the business is like fundamentally changed, like at various points? Like was it almost like going up onto a shelf kind of a thing, and then going up onto the next shelf after a kind of period of time almost?
Yeah, I guess firstly it started with just execution, and then like you kind of hire yourself out of that role, and then it becomes like, and then it was a big focus probably for a year and a half on just operations, and building operations and processes with Matt, or before Matt joined, and then hiring, building different departments, different offers. But now like most of my role is strategic. From a decision making perspective, like allocation of resource, from like a management of team, from like allocation of capital, I guess, as well, if you're going to acquiring a business, etc., things like that, and delegation down. Like I think that's the thing. And then I still get involved in like some client strategy because I enjoy it. Like I think that's probably the point at which I've got with Soar specifically as a business is like we've got such a strong C-suite and organizational structure and team that like I'm so top level from a strategy perspective for growing that business, but what I actually where I can add quite a lot of value is like actually in the weeds of Ecom Brands because of what I do with JAQ. So I still do support a lot of the businesses we work with there, which is probably not what a lot of other people at that stage would do, but it's just where I enjoy working.
I mean, you've put a lot of emphasis on that always since the beginning as well with Soar, where like obviously you guys run ads, you run email and like a couple of different services, but you're always very much on like ecom consultancy. That was always something that seems like you've like had something you've always wanted to push. So like, so even there, do you feel it's almost just kind of in the identity of the company to an extent where like nearly the founder can't help himself with certain brands where he just kind of wants to get involved a wee bit more there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what separated us from the market over the last like 12 months, I think, and why we've grown so fast. Like we've like 3x revenue in 12 months nearly when you bring it all together. And we're growing probably fast. We've grown in January so far faster than we probably ever have of last year in MRR gains terms. And we had the lowest churn rate we've ever had in Q4 last year. So it's like all of those things give me a bit of a signal that we're doing something right. And it's been like an intention to grow like a business that we enter by providing service, but we make ourselves indispensable by going like above and beyond in what we do. And I think that's an evolving. I think that as the e-com space has evolved a lot over the last 18 months to become more specialist. I think in terms of like you need to have like a higher proficiency to really add value to clients. And I think that idea of like cream rising to the top. I think there's other people in the industry feeling the same. That maybe it's a lot harder to now probably start an agency and scale it than it was maybe 2-3 years ago. So yeah, that's been a big focus for us. It's just like becoming like we call it our outsourced CMO mentality, like adding as much value to the people we work with as possible beyond our just initial scope.
So you're saying that for like let's say adding you're saying so there's like the shift towards like specialization almost in a sense, but then also like for you guys, like I suppose like how does that play out in terms of with you doing let's say multiple things for people? And I think particularly on like running media buying and creative, I know like creative is more for you, but it's kind of under the same umbrella with what you guys do. I think that's obviously just that's really like the lifeblood of an ecom business, at least in the marketing side, is like their like quality of their assets and their media buying in many respects.
Yeah.
But on that specificity, because you do multiple things, do you mean specificity in terms of like people going very deep on one service, or do you mean specificity on people going very deep on consultancy for brands? Like how has that evolved in the ecom industry? How would you forecast that to continue to evolve?
I think it's changed a lot in the last 24 months around everything from availability of funding, changing the goalposts for many ecom brands, changing it to being like profitable, sustainable, profitable growth, making like the intersection between like finance and marketing more important than ever, making sure that gone are the days of just raising loads of VC money and just spending into the abyss and just not really caring. So I think there's a big not caring, but like having that freedom to do so. So there's been a big shift there. I think like acquisition strategy, content that used to just be able to be like laser targeting Facebook ads. Now it's a lot more around like messaging, positioning, pain points, objections, content, landing page, media buying, all in one big process. Ultimately, growth is a process, and like it's a process that you can apply in the main part to multiple businesses. It's just having the expertise and the ability to do that. So I think it's become more specialist and a little bit harder to do in that regard. But we've just gone deeper on it. Like like covering all of the things I've just mentioned and becoming specialists in all areas, so we can advise people across everything on how to like achieve that growth.
And there, like when I was chatting to Conor, he was saying that in this year, like this year, now that we're in 2024, it's end of 2023 when we chatted, that like we'll kind of see that more so come to fruition of funding fully drying up for people almost, or at least feeling that way. So, I mean, would you see 2024 being quite a difficult year for e-commerce brands, like even compared to 2023?
Yeah, I think it's difficult to predict like macroeconomics and impacts, but yeah, like I think like ultimately that headwind has such a massive impact. But and I think 2024 we're going to see that for a decent part of 2024. Maybe it'll sort of start to correct itself towards the end of the year. But yeah, I think like I don't think we'll. I think we've had the kind of days of massive VC money in e-commerce. I could be wrong, and people that may come back in a couple of years. But if you look at like some of the businesses that have gone under over the last 12 to 18 months, like Thrasio, that raised shitloads of money, rolled up loads of Amazon companies and went bust after being valued at $1 billion. Multiple brands that IPO'd now being worth peanuts, or like relative peanuts to when they floated on the stock exchange. Loads of horror stories of brands that raised money at stupid valuations and then have then been sold off. I just think those days have gone. They may, as I say, they may come back, but I also think revenue-based financing, which was a massive thing over the last 18 months, is a model that's going to be a lot more challenging and not as available. I don't know about you, but I've not seen Wayflyer touted about by all the Twitter influencers recently, or any of the other ones that they were shelling pretty heavily through the middle of last year, early last year. So I think that's changed quite a lot as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that was like you can kind of, it's funny, like you kind of tell like a lot of that, like I suppose like on the grapevine from Twitter, from like what's happening there. Just like you knew crypto had gone wallop when all the playboys went monk mode. You know what I mean? It's just like all the international playboys now monk mode. I'd say crypto's really fucking dead at that point. Obviously now it's coming back, you know. So if anyone wants to get into the Solana trenches, now would be the time to do so. But
yeah,
they're, I suppose they're like on the brand side. Do you know? So you've had the progression of, you actually first began with a brand, which apparently was some pretty sick clobber by all respects. You know, Matt was saying that the Dusk was some. He said you were onto some stuff.
Yeah,
it was good gear.
Yeah, well, it was good at the time.
What was the crack with that? Because I was going to ask about JAQ, but how, like that was your first taste in e-commerce. You actually started a brand. You scaled that, didn't you? And to a decent level, and then
doing mid six figures. It was doing like 6 figures a month. Yeah, I can't remember the exact numbers. It was so long ago. I was like 8.
Really?
It was 18, I think, at the time. It was doing like 100 to 200k a month, selling like basically just drop shipping Sherpa jackets and jeans. And then we tried to move it private labeling into the UK and got the freight costs and completely wrong. And we were just idiots at the time. Got offices we didn't need. Just stupid decision making, really. But yeah, it was good. It was a good experience. I learned a lot from it.
And would you say even there though, like having the brand in the beginning, and that was even like what got you to maybe put that emphasis on consultancy nearly right from early enough doors with Soar, like with brands where you actually had experience running one?
Partly that, but then also partly I'm just a big believer in like, how do you, like, LTV builds businesses, like LTV builds agencies, not new clients. And like the best way to protect LTV is to just over deliver for people beyond their expectations. And that's how I think we win so much business, and we have such a low churn rate, because we give people a very, very good experience for how much they pay. And we probably could charge people more than we do for what we offer, but we get stickiness of people staying with us for 3 years, which makes it a lot less stressful and a lot like higher profit and faster growth rate, because it doesn't require you to like chase more sales to beat high churn rate.
completely agreed. Best way of doing it, mate.
Yeah, so it's been a big focus.
So with the brand side, I know the you becoming CMO of JAQ came about in a funny enough way, at least the initial meeting. Like how did that side of things kind of come about from the beginning to how it developed to how you ultimately are kind of CMO of the group?
Yeah, I met Conor in a Weatherspoons in Manchester Airport on the way to such English crack over a cold bottle of Heineken in Manchester Airport. I think I tweeted at anyone going to Geek Out Dubai. He replied to me, DM'd me, saying he was, and it turned out he was on the same flight, but he was in like first class and we were in economy, so there's levels at the time. And then off the back of that, just spent that period with him in Dubai. It was good fun, and then we ended up working with him on like a content package through the agency, and then from there just started talking to Conor loads, and then over time he asked me to do it. He asked me if I wanted to kind of come on and support as CMO for the business. Originally said no, and then I asked him if he still wanted me to do it, and told him how much I wanted to do, how much I'd charge to do it, and then we just agreed, and there we go. And then I joined like about a year and a bit ago now, a year and a half ago, I think, joined in. And just took over gradually over a period of time, just phased him out the market and just took it all over.
Yeah, mate, he was telling me that even up until like very late on revenue as the brand, he was spending like nearly 90% of his day on media buying. I was like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah,
that is trench work.
I didn't trust anyone to take over, so then I convinced him to take it over, and then we just phased him. We still run the media buying through Soar, but I started there and then just gradually took over more and more of that side. Now we run the whole marketing department. We've got 7 internal staff, but we'll probably have about 10 by the end of this quarter, just on marketing function. But that obviously covers 4 brands, so not just Tev. It's probably not enough people either.
And then, so what did you like in the beginning? Was there an element of like for you to onboard into that? I'm sure there's an element of like drinking from the fire hose, because you're inheriting like this whole business, this whole like marketing department, and there's a lot more to manage. Where now as well, even though you get like very hands on with a lot of the brands you work with through Soar, there's still probably even more hands on element there.
So yeah, way
beginning phase,
way more hands on.
Yeah. So what was that like in the beginning?
It was a really good business to join. There's many reasons why I did it, and one of them is because I think it was it was one of the best e-commerce setups I'd seen from everything from a net gross margin perspective through to efficiency on channels, which makes it easy to take over because there's a lot of opportunity to there's good foundations to come into. The team that we have now, I've hired from start to, so everybody that works in the marketing department now I've brought on since joining. So I've been involved in that growing the organization process. But like when I came, not to be transparent, came on and just scaled the fuck out of Facebook ads and sent more emails. Like basically that was the first 6 months. I just made more content, scaled paid, and just sent better emails and re-optimized the email flows. And that's again like practice what you preach. Like I've spent so much time speaking to clients about doing less better, and just doing 1 or 2 channels really well can get you to like, that took us to double-digit million months, like not double-digit million, sorry, single-digit million months,
Double
like in 7 figures a month, like within multiple 7 figures a month within 6 months, and like just by doing that. And then we laid in TikTok. That was a big win. Really scaled TikTok aggressively through last year. But yeah, just not overcomplicating it. Now it's becoming we did 100 and something% growth last year. Like doing that again this year is a completely different beast, like a way more challenging proposition that requires like a lot more work streams. But it was less complex than you'd probably think coming into it because of where it was in its growth path and how like linear that next phase looked.
Yeah, it is funny there where you do see brands who do nearly take that to the nth degree, I would say, in a sense, where they are just like one channel. And like you would see like the Kill Crew lads are definitely like Facebook maximalists, just like Facebook few
Yeah,
emails, and that's literally them. But I I don't know, of course, like that then changes later on, but it's kind of like it's the same thing you can do with an agency where like you can just diversify into like there can be something that's working for you to book meetings that just works, but you wind up convincing yourself that all of this stuff is more complicated than it is in
yeah,
a sense. And don't get me wrong, it is complex, but it's like you just feel this draw to like add complexity to it and almost like diversify too early on when you have something that is working and can really work well at the level that it's at. And like it's definitely not at its sort of saturation point where it starts to get really difficult to make incremental gains.
yeah, yeah. I think that's true. That's true in pretty much every business, I imagine. Like when you get to sort of like Google's size, like you can obviously allocate a very small amount of your total resource to testing something new, so it's like worth doing that. When you're like quite a small business and you've got maybe 5 to 10 people, not very much runway if everything was to go to shit. Where you spend your time and your money is really important. I think like um, keeping it simple from that perspective and just doing more of what is working, like doubling down on what is working is usually the best option. I think there's a really good example of this is a Grant Cardone consultancy call he does with Alex Hormozy. I think Hormozy paid 250 grand for it and just he smacked it on YouTube and just like gave everybody the recording away. But basically all he says in that call is like he's asking him how to get more out of what he's doing, and Grant is literally like, "You're not posting enough content. Just post 10 times more content," and he did it. And I think Alex does like a reflection on it afterwards, and it like tripled his business just by 10xing what he was doing through the same channels. And I think that's the same with agencies. Like we don't do outbound marketing. You guys do. We only do paid ads and content. And like we've done that well this year. Our big focus for up until now, we've done that really well. Our focus for 2024 is make more content, spend more on ads. And like we're already making those are currently the two channels. It's like, how do we double the amount of content output through mine and Joe's channels, through YouTube, through stuff like this, and then how do we triple Facebook ad budget behind that, and just everything will probably work if we do that well enough, rather than trying to do like 15 other things.
100%. Yeah, I think in terms of what works well, also there almost is a narrow amount of things that do actually work.
Yeah,
Do you know, like outbound emailing works, like content works, ads work, you know, but a lot of other ancillary things you can do, like they're just not going to be, they're not going to be like the core thing that like actually drives your business on to, you know, to see real success. I wouldn't say like if you're, you know, like what would be like example, like let's say like trying to do like a community funnel or something like that. It's just not really going to work, or whatever it is like that. It just isn't in that like Overton window of like this definitely works and works really well.
yeah. I think like community for a brand is good, and is a good like. There's a few brands that are good examples of where they've used that as a pretty big marketing driver, like Pure Sport being the one that I always think of that are really crushing that. Represent another one, but I think if you pull their attribution report, probably 70% of the customers still come from Meta. Like, just and that's why I think like if you look at pretty much every single brand we work with, 80% of their customers come from Meta ads. It's like the idea that you can just, if you're looking to spend more and more of your budget away from that platform, it's probably a sign that you're not doing that platform is still going to be your biggest driver. Like you should still be trying to grow it consistently month on month. And it's like that focus on really getting that to where it to as great a scale and efficiency as possible should be the focus for most people, rather than trying to do 5 different growth avenues at once.
And so on like the brand side, so you had like this path for growth to to get to a certain level, like when you come on board as CMO. But then, like you're saying, going 100% growth again would be a completely different beast. Do you have any sort of map in your mind of what you would need to do in order to exact, let's say, that amount of growth? Is that, would that even be the plan? I'm not sure, but let's say it were the plan to do 100% ish growth again. Is it as simple as work as like make more creatives,
Make
spend
more
more on
ads,
ads,
spend
send
more
more
on it.
emails, or
No, I think it becomes more complex. Like if we did that, we'd be nearing nine figures as a brand. Like it would be a lot of growth. Like that's really hard. And if you look at most like big businesses, like Lululemon, I think is the famous one. If you look at the graph, it's like they stacked like 15% growth year on year for 25 years. But when you compound that for that period of time, it puts you at like $1 billion+ valuation. It's rare that you'll find like you're not the ability to just 100% grow year on year is probably not realistic either. I do still think, however, like ultimately, like it comes down to spending more on ads, making more content. We probably just need to do it across a few more mediums. Like when you get to a certain level of scale for the ecom brands, like I think your meta ads become more middle of funnel. Like we're spending hundreds of thousands a month on meta, um, mid six, mid to high six figures a month on meta ads. Uh, we find this point of diminishing returns with those, but then when you start to activate other channels, whether it's TikTok, whether it's out of home, whether it's TV, influencer seeding, it then allows you to spend more on Meta, that main channel driver, that main revenue driver. So it's a bit more holistic strategy into this year. But when you look back at our finances, we still will spend 80% of our ad spend on one channel. It'll be Meta. So there's still an element of wanting to still needing to spend more money there. So yeah, I've got a bit of a roadmap. Well, I think we know what we need to do, but it's a lot harder to keep that growth rate up.
you touched on TikTok as well. Like, how does that, that I think, would that work really well for every brand, or like, have you seen varying results with TikTok? Like, remember TikTok ads when they first came out, everyone's like, oh, this is going to be like new Facebook ads, like new gold
Yeah.
rush, like that, and kind of didn't necessarily pan out that way. How does that help for? Do you think it's more like diversification play for like bigger brands, or can it be a really good kind of route one channel?
It's a good channel. Like and I think our approach for most brands is like do Meta first and then layer TikTok on top of it. But that can be, I think that's not true for everybody. If you're like a lower AOV beauty brand, or if you're a brand that really suits TikTok as a channel, it is a massive opportunity to capitalize on. It's lower CPM, it's less competitive. It works really well for visual products, for viral products. So like if you're in that and you can like find like product platform fit, I guess you'd call it, with TikTok, then it'll be a gold mine for you. Where we use it is like we got performance on Meta to a certain level, and then we like layered TikTok on top of it. It's more of like it's a closer. Well, we put it in between like Meta and YouTube. It's more of an awareness channel. It's a little bit more upper funnel. More of the attribution comes through views, not clicks. You need to model your impression attribution in to really get results with something like a phosphor. Um, but we're for the essence of it, like we spend about half of what we spend a day on Meta on TikTok. The percentage of net new visitors per day is higher from TikTok than it is Meta. It's really good at unlocking net new audience. CAC is actually lower on TikTok than it is on Meta, but the volume of customers isn't as high. So it's like we can't spend the same and get the same volume of new customers, but the efficiency on those new customers is better. So it's a real channel that can drive growth. But we are in an AOV category that works for it. If you're a high AOV, like you're not going to get mad attributed ROAS off TikTok. It's stupid to think that, but I still think it can fit into a marketing strategy. It's just about what you expect from it. and what you want from it as a channel, and benchmarking it differently.
So primarily, like you're saying, like more visual brands, lower AOV would be the two main almost factors that would make it kind of a viable channel in a sense.
Yeah, I would say so. And then if you're like a higher AOV like brand, then I think it's just expecting going into it and being like, it can generate returns, but I'm not going to benchmark it on the same expectations as other channels.
Gotcha. I suppose then, like, how do you? I've asked you this a few times before, but like, privately, but like, how do you manage, everything, like in terms of your time? Because you've got Soar, obviously now, like you're saying, more strategic role, but you're still involved with a number of clients there for you as well, and content. I think as a service, like just with like the moving parts that go into it, it's definitely an operationally complex kind of model, and you have a rogue factor, which are creators that you have to be dealing with. And then obviously you have being CMO for a brand group, like not even just one brand, but like four, and then you have Conor to deal with into the bargain. It's just kind of a lot of stuff there. Like how do you manage everything like across the board, even time wise?
Batching calls to certain days, keeping days like themed by business, running everything through my calendar. But more importantly is having like really good people. Like I could vanish off the face of the earth tomorrow and Soar would still grow because we've got a really good team in the business, like Matt, Jamie, Sam, Jacob, like our COO. Well, Matt's going to be MD soon. MD, CMO, COO, head of retention. Like these people that allow me to just do what I need to do, and they own their domain like better than I could. That's the true unlock that allows me to do other things. Same with For You is like having Lucas, Liam, Joe in their areas of the business takes a lot of like pressure and time off myself. And then the same with JAQ is like having the right people in the right seats. Like it's just that's the key really. I could probably spend more of my time on JAQ than the other businesses at this stage, but it's only because the other ones are set up in a way that allows me to do that. And that's where I think at scale, like the management and coaching becomes so key. Like your job, the highest leverage thing you can do is make the people below you, or like the people in the business better, and facilitate them to do their best work.
Yeah. I think you'd said to me early, like a good while ago, what was it, like the right people, and you those three things, the right people, the right seats with the right processes. Was that your adage?
I've said that before, I think. Something to that and then just leave them alone. Like, yeah, leave them alone.
Beautiful. So what's the plan with everything for 2024? Like with how you'll go with focus. So like you've had massive jump in MRR with Soar in pretty short space of time. So then you've got a lot of growth going on there. Your churn rate's extremely low. You have obviously the brands are scaling as well. So where is focus going to go this year? Any goals that you have on that front? What are you thinking for the year 2024? What's ahead?
We're just about to finalize acquiring a content agency. I don't think we've announced that anywhere. I can't yet the name of it, but we've acquired a business to do content in Soar. We're then going to pull in the landing page piece so that we do the full thing. So our focus there is just continuing to make our service better and be very cognizant of like, if you were the CMO of a big business, what would you want from your agency, and just building a service like that, like excellence. I call it, it's our product really, isn't it? Like look at, try and get people internally in the mindset of looking at, I can always forget his name, Brian Chesky from Airbnb, and how solid he is as like a product founder. It's like we need to do that with our service, because our service is our products. Like keep on top of that as a foremost thing. But then, yeah, it's a lot of growth for Soar is going to just come from that. I think continuing to control what we can control. We want to penetrate the US market. We're incredibly UK focused in terms of revenue right now, which is unusual, I think, for the size of business we are. I think most would probably be more towards like 50-50 split. I think we're like 80-20 UK. So trying to penetrate the US market at scale. And then other revenue streams, like I think we're going to probably bring some sort of software piece, a few other ideas we have to just continue to grow like the enterprise value of the company as a whole. But yeah, loads of opportunity there. I think we're on a good path for Soar, hopefully. And then JAQ Group is trying to build like a profit first hook group where we grow profitable brands instead of just burning money. So just try and get like all the brands we've got in the pipeline now profitable and above like 100k a month in revenue. I think is very doable for this year. Hopefully we'll do that sooner rather than later. But to do that, it just requires like people and process like excellence. So just working through that piece, yeah.
Sick, mate. Sick. Where would you direct people to find kind of what you're up to these days?
Probably, unfortunately, because I hate the place, but LinkedIn. Like, I used to be a Twitter maxi, but I just don't use it enough anymore. That's my personal goal, is start putting out more Twitter content this year. LinkedIn, probably Olly Hudson on LinkedIn, or Twitter is Oliver W Hudson is my account name. So probably either of those places. If you want to chat, reach out. If you want some help with anything ecom related, I'll bounce some ideas and send me a message.
100%. Olly, thanks very much for coming on the show, mate. Appreciate having you on.
Thank you for the invite.